This has been one of those weeks. One of those aha weeks. Aha, ha, 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 ha. For a couple of weeks now, I've actually felt a little lost. I didn't know what was really going on. I was hanging in there and just being with myself and going, there's something going on here. I don't know what it is. And this was the week that it all just seemed to come together. It was like, oh. And so what happened, I'm going to do my best to describe this new, for me, a new way of being with myself is it started out with me thinking about how I used to have all these voices in my head. The critic, the shamed voice, all these different voices, right? And then recently I realized that I now only have two. My ego mind voice and my higher self voice. And I've been saying to you for 2 years that the ego makes a great servant, a horrible master, that when we follow that higher self, that what I'm calling soul's intention, that it leads us to a greater life. And then 2 weeks ago, I talked about Van Gogh and Mozart, about how they were leading their greater life, and yet they still suffered. And that got me on a trail of thought and a trail of inquiry for myself around, yes, that's really true. So what does that mean, and what's actually going on for me in this? Because I still have my ego voice and I have my higher self voice, and the two of them in the past had been very conflicting with each other. There had been times when these two voices had very much been in conflict. And I used words like struggle. And I used words like they're battling each other for my attention. And maybe you felt that. That if you've been in this teaching for any length of time, you start to feel like you get a sense of your higher self, but then you wind up acting like coming out of your ego self. And maybe you're not really happy with that. And there was a time I wasn't. I wasn't happy when I was being my ego self. And that changed this week. As I started to realize that for me, the growth that I'm experiencing no longer has it as a struggle or a battle, but a dance. That I'm now dancing with it. That these two voices are now dancing and working together. And it made me realize that maybe it's not so much that the higher self is the master and the ego is the servant, but that they can cohabitate and dance with each other in a way that can bring me even greater joy than I thought. I've been following this idea in Zen that the path is easy, just stop picking and choosing. And the idea of stopping picking and choosing really bugged me because I'm here on earth to pick and choose. I'm here on earth to decide what it is I like and don't like and really have fun with that. But it's not fun when it hurts. And so that's what led me down, well, maybe picking and choosing only leads to hurt. But of course it doesn't. It leads to sometimes ecstatic joy. And so as I was watching this week, my dance with my ego and my higher self and how they were playing together, there were moments at which the voice was one. They weren't separate voices anymore, like I'd been experiencing. That the things I'd been saying about my ego mind, which leads to a lot of upset, upset and hurt and blame and all these things that I'm really not experiencing much of anymore at all, I'm starting to notice that they're learning from each other. I'm becoming this wholeness of learning where they're playing with each other in this whole new way. And so, for example, last week, one morning, Ash said something to me that I took as very out of principle, and I told her about how it was out of principle, and I didn't do it in a very good way. So she got pissed, She was not happy with me. And that got me thinking about Jesus, being Easter and all. I started thinking about Jesus. And I thought about him on the cross. And a lot of people have these ideas about what his last thoughts were, what his last words were. Well, I think his last words were, maybe I went too far when I knocked over those tables at the temple. Maybe that wasn't as good an idea as I thought it was at the time. And then, ouch, this really hurts, these nails being knocked through my hands and feet. That he might have questioned some of the actions he took that led him to being on that cross. And I got to think, well, since I'm not on a cross, I get to do this again. So I went out and I said to Ash, how about you let me do this again? And she was still too pissed, so she was like, not yet. But a little while later, she was like, okay. And I did it in a much more gentler, fashion. And she just went, great. And we were good. And I noticed in that doing this, my ego being upset about the separation that had occurred between Ash and I, and it's wanting to heal that. And then my higher self being right there with that about what are we going to do to heal this? And how we're going to work together to heal this. And then I started looking at other parts of my life around my healing, the ways in which I'm feeling better about myself, the ways in which I'm showing up, like, not being defensive and not feeling any shame and not being critical of myself anymore. It isn't like I don't catch like I caught myself, maybe I could have done that better, right? But I wasn't being critical about it. I was looking at, well, what can I do to make this better? And it was different, and it was like I was working together with myself in this dance that was fun, funny, and worked out great. So it just felt different in my body. Do you know what I'm talking about? How it feels different in your body when all of you is just working together. And then how it turns out, it feels healing. I'm just feeling more moments as synchronicity and healing. I'm feeling those moments more, like on a regular basis, going on all the time, instead of once in a blue moon where, I had that synchronicity. How do I have that more often in my life? How you get to have that more often in your life is in this dance, as far as I can tell. That in this dance, there's something that has a lot of hurt to it. The ego gets hurt, right? There's pain. And when we close ourselves off and we don't allow ourselves to experience that pain, well, just realize you're closing yourself off to the other side too. The more you close yourself off to pain, the more you close yourself off to the higher ends of joy. Because they're the same coin. They're feelings. They're feelings that we have. My ego loves to compete. I love to compete. Right? I know there's this whole thing about let's not be competitive, let's just be cooperative all the time. But I love to compete. I love competitions. I have a lot of fun with them. I was since I was a little kid, right? And still do. And so I play Wordle with some family members every morning, and whoever gets the fewest gets the word. And if you don't know what Wordle is, it's a word game where you have 6 chances to get the word. Figure out what word is the word of the day. And in this game that I play with my relatives and friends, the one who figures it out in the fewest amount of tries wins. And we do it for money. High stakes, we're talking 50 cents a day, baby. I love winning at that. It's really fun because when it comes up and you get the word, it's all green, right? It's gray. It's all gray until you get the word, and then it's all green. And I love to cooperate. I love working with others and figuring that out, and I don't have to give up one part of myself for another. They get to dance. You don't have to give up one part of yourself for another. You get to dance. That's the beauty of it. You know, once you start realizing, once you start living this teaching, I mean, we all come in here because we think there's something more for us. There's a greater, why else would you be here? You could be out doing something else. You're here because you got that sense and like-minded people that there's something greater for us, and there is. In an ever-expanding universe, there's always going to be something greater because it never stops expanding, which means you never stop expanding. You have the opportunity to evolve from day one to the last day you're here. It's only you who gets to decide whether you're going to see it that way, play it that way, and be that way. That's your call. That's your choice. But the opportunity, my wife and I this morning were talking about where are our best opportunities for growth. We have before us the opportunity to evolve and grow every second of our lives. It's wondrous, the infinite nature of the possibility of growth here for ourselves. And then what happens for me, what's been happening for me as I continue to evolve, like I felt like I did just this week, is I get to experience more synchronicities. I get to experience more of life's wonder and awe. So I play tennis. I play tennis with the same people about once a week. And on Saturdays, I go out and I walk. And I walk what I'm going to talk to you about. I do it all week, but, you know, the day before, I want to make sure I'm clear on what I'm going to say to you on Sunday. So I'm out. It's a gorgeous day yesterday, right? And I'm out walking. And normally, in the winter, we play tennis inside. But normally, when we play outside, we play over at Borden Park, right? So I was surprised as I'm walking to see my group of people I play with at the tennis courts just over here in Forest Heights. There they were, just as I'm walking by, and they called me over, and they go, hey, you want to play some? I wasn't dressed for it or nothing, but they wanted me to play, so I went out, and I played a couple of rounds with them, and then said, I got to, get ready for tomorrow. Thank you. And I thought, that was so synchronicitous, because when I was on that tennis court, I realized how similar, for me, tennis is to life, right? And so here's what I saw about that. Sometimes you get to serve. Sometimes you get to start the creative process in your life. Sometimes the creative process has already started and you have an opportunity to respond to it, right? It's coming at you or it's before you, and then what do? Right? In tennis, the object of the game is to knock it back to the other side of the net in a place in which the opponents on the other side have a hard time returning it back to you, right? That's the job of tennis. It takes a lot of skill. I notice, because I haven't really played regularly since college, that I have a lot of unforced errors. And I started thinking about, wow, how many unforced errors do I have in life? How often do I walk around and whatever's going on coming at me is I don't handle well, like when Ash said what she did to me that morning, don't handle it well. I would call that an unforced error. Right? Now, sometimes somebody hits a great shot at you. Life does throw you a knuckleball, curveball, whatever, and you got to really, bend your, be really good to get that ball back, and that happens in life too, right? Sometimes what's thrown at us is a little different than the average everyday thing that's thrown with us. But if the average everyday thing that's thrown at us, somehow you don't respond to in a good way, I would call that an unforced error. And it occurred to me as I'm playing tennis that they're way easier to work on than the harder stuff, than the ones that are like, you got to reach for and you got to run for and you got to do this to somehow get it back. Like the car breaks down, you just lost your job, your spouse says, I want a divorce, or whatever. The larger thing, or somebody dies or you get sick and you're in the hospital. These are the larger plays. So it's understandable if you get a little thrown or don't get to the ball or, don't respond so great in the beginning when those things happen. And in tennis, they rate you, right? You get a 3.5 rating if your unforced errors, and it's all about the unforced errors up to a particular point. 3.5 and 4.0, you get to 4.0 because you have fewer unforced errors. Not that your serve is all that great, not that you're playing all that great. You simply have less unforced errors. And you can become a 4.0 player. You get to 4.5, it becomes a little bit different a game. But in life, it occurred to me, this is what we're doing here. Right? We're playing this game of life. And how often do we allow ourselves to get thrown by little stuff? And the beauty of it is, and the reason I'm bringing this up the way I am, is it's simply a skill to be practiced. The way you get better at unforced errors is you practice. You practice, you practice, you practice. It was way easier to practice on what happened with Ash the other morning than it would be if I was somebody got hit by a car or all the myriad of things that can happen in life that are large. How often do you take the time to practice when it's small? Because if you get better at when it's small, there's a much better chance of handling it well when it's large. Does that make sense? So the best time to practice is when it's small. And that's where the dance is the easiest to see. Right? That's when the dance between your ego and your higher self is just so easy to recognize because you're not that charged, you're not that triggered. It's just right there. And yet, if you think you're too busy, if you think there's something else more important to do, you could miss that moment of practice. And don't we? Don't we miss that moment of practice really often on the little things? And that's not how you prepare for the big things. And so that's become very forefront for me to look at, is how am I being with the little things that I am now calling unforced errors? You find your own words for it. This is just what I'm using, tennis metaphors seem to work out really well. I wound up on the court, now I'm filled with tennis metaphors. Who knows what I'll have for you next week, But this week it's tennis metaphors. But how that dance goes for each of us, I am starting to notice that because I practice so much on those little things, that the bigger things are just starting, I'm better at them. I'm just better at it. And the only thing that made me better at it is I keep practicing. That's it. I keep my mind focused. I keep reading what it is that will serve me. And then I apply it every day. And so, I've talked to you guys about how I don't even recognize myself. I was so angry when I was younger and so rebellious and didn't care about anybody or anything except that I was going to get mine. I was that guy. And now I look at myself and I go, how did I do it? How did I change so drastically and so dramatically? Well, for one, it took 40 years. This didn't happen overnight. But for two, I practiced. I really didn't want to be that person. I wanted to be who I am now, who I continue to become. And that's what it takes too. You got to want to be that person whose ego becomes so molded and dancing with your higher self that it wants to be kind. I mean, you just want to be kind. You want to be compassionate. You want to be present. You want to have joy, like was during the meditation, talking about joy. But to have that, you got to be willing to open your heart to the pain. You don't get to have one without the other. You got to be willing to sit in some of the hardest places. But to get good at sitting in the hardest places, I would start with unforced errors, the little things. See how you sit with that. How I sat with my wife being mad at me after it was clearly me that blew it. Instead of getting defensive because I was right about what I said or this or that, I just went straight to, you know what, I can do this better. Because I want to. I want to be that person. And you do too. I know you do, or you wouldn't be here. And this is how you do it, little steps, one at a time. Bringing forth that which is greatest within us and letting our ego enjoy that. I am noticing more and more how much I enjoy my ego and I'm on the tennis court, right? And I do an unforced error and my immediate reaction is, "Arr!" And then it's all done. Right? It's done. I have the reaction, it's done. Have a reaction, it's done. It's so cool. Instead of holding on to it and thinking about this and thinking about that, simply, so I get to have my reaction of, ah, and then I get to go, oh, let's move on. Practice. Took practice. And the more we can do that, the more we can grow into that, we get to have it all. Without thinking, oh, I don't get to pick and choose, or, oh, I got to watch out for having that reaction. No, you get to have it all. It's beautiful. Life is beautiful. You get to have every reaction you got. You just got to learn how to move on. Practice moving on. Be with the next. How do I do better? I love you guys, and I am so grateful because because I'm here with you, constantly am moving myself to grow more. I'm getting to be a better person because I have to get up here and talk to you guys about it. And I am loving this. I couldn't have imagined it turned out better. And I know that that's true for each and every one of you here. Thank you. I love you.